Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody that's hopefully for somebody. Welcome to episode 46. I can't believe we've done 46 of these things already. This is my first review of Barbenheimer, I believe is how it's been dubbed. And you're going to have to check out the social media for my outfit for this review because it's worth checking out. If you have an interest at all in seeing the podcast in film form, I'm considering doing a Patreon where video versions of the podcast would be posted there. So if that is of interest to you, you can DM me on Twitter directly at Kyle_Naranja or at Film Realist, or you can email. All the contact info and socials for the podcast is listed in the show description. So the first review is going to be a surprise, even if you're listening to the episode right now. Thank you so much for listening to the episode. Please share on your podcast platform, review the show and whatnot. The theme song for the show was, of course, done by the band You Versus Me. You can find their content on Apple Music and Spotify. And before we get into the review, I have one final piece of news. Depending on where you're listening to this, it's not your favorite podcast platform. The podcast is now on Amazon Music, so you can listen to on an Alexa, an Echo Dot, any of the Amazon products, as well as iHeartRadio. So if those are platforms you like, as well as Radio Public. I decided to put the show on other podcasts, help the show grow. Well, that's it for any other news. I know my voice doesn't sound great today, and I apologize, but I wanted to get this episode done tonight, day of release. You are listening to it. I'm recording it the same day, which is getting into the first review, which will be a surprise until we get into it. It's not even going to be listed in the show notes. It will just say movie review spoilers. So let's get into the review of this week's episode. All right, the first surprise of this episode for the week is this review. Well, again, if you've checked out on social medias, you'll know what it's for based on my apparel. Maybe you won't. I don't know. This review will be of Barbie, the film from Greta Gerwig, who directed and co-wrote it with her husband, Noah Baumbach, starring Margot Robbie, Ryan Gosling, Simu Liu, Will Ferrell, Kate McKinnon, Issa Rae, Ray Perlman. It's a jam-packed movie with a bunch of stars. The marketing for this has been substantially vague, and I really appreciate that that was the case. This film, I have to say, what I was most impressed by, I think I just said that twice in the span of 2 sentences. Apologies. It's very late at night. I was excited for this film because the possibility of what it could be was something special, based on the fact that it was handling a property that has a divisive viewpoint, I think, amongst pop culture with what Barbie has meant, specifically to that of women. I'm speaking at this from the perspective of a cisgender straight male, and I was very curious and very excited. I think the comedy could have been really good, and I'm happy to report that this movie was fantastic. It was a jam-packed Thursday night screening. The comedy is hilarious. Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling are fantastic in their versions of Ken and Barbie. One of the benefits of the film, again, this is no spoilers, is that having a wide variety of Ken allows for each actor's unique take on what that character means to Barbie Land to be quite comical, and ultimately how it affects the story as a whole. There is very little actually that I can get into in the non-spoiler section, so apologies if you have not seen the film yet and you're just listening to the non-spoiler section of the review. The film is very, very funny and has a lot of heart to it. It addresses a number of topics that I don't really want to give away. I think if you were expecting this to be an intellectual property or a brand show or film where obviously it's marketing material, that's at the end of the day why these intellectual properties, toys, video games, I guess board games has happened. You sunk my battleship. I'm still upset that Liam Neeson never said that in the movie Battleship. What a waste. I don't want to get into that. That just makes me sad. But these films can often wind up being hollow and have very little depth to them. The depth of a kiddie pool you might see on somebody's lawn in the middle of July. That was an oddly specific reference. I may or may not have had one of those for my children. But let's neither here nor there. I wouldn't even say I'm surprised. I had high expectations for this film. I have thoroughly enjoyed all of Greta Gerwig's movies, from Lady Bird, Little Women. Specifically, those are the ones I enjoyed the most. And Noah Baumbach, also a phenomenal screenwriter and director. So the combination of both of them on the screenplay and the fact that Greta Gerwig was deciding to make this from the outset made it appear to be more than just a phone-in paycheck job. And especially for the two leads who could pretty much do anything they want. I know Margot Robbie is also listed as a producer on the film. And so what could just be a commercial, and that has been done. It has been done successfully in the past. The best metaphor that I could come up for this film in total is it is a live-action version of the Lego movie, but goes even further. And that is saying something, given the fact that the Lego movie is one of my favorite films of the 2010s, which was a movie all about creativity and putting people in a box and doing things unexpectedly with materials you weren't expecting. And Barbie takes that baton from the Lego movie and takes it to a whole new level. The fact that you have real live action actors playing these toys and their relationship to the real world and to pop culture and women and men in general is something that was really enlightening, I think, to some degree at the same time, but the film still managed to be wildly entertaining. So if you were expecting, as I said earlier, something that's going to have very little depth, you were going to be pleasantly surprised, because this was heartwarming all the way through. It was wildly entertaining. It was very funny. It's very smart. And the fact that this level of effort was put into this film is clear why it was able to attract the talent that it did have. Again, Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie can do whatever they want. And the fact that the script written by Greta and Noah attracted them to do so, it's not shocking after seeing the film. I highly recommend you take this film, I should start over. Again, I'm recording this at 11:30 in the evening. Apologies. I highly recommend you see this film if you're an adult, even if you have no experiences with Barbie. My sister is 5 years younger than me and did have some growing up, but didn't play with them often. But if you have zero exposure to this brand as a whole, I still think this film is going to be entertaining from start to finish. The message that it does have can affect, I think, almost anybody in a wide array, and it has something important to say. This, however, is not going to be a film that I think is good for younger children. My daughter is 5, and I don't think I would take her to this, just because I think a lot of the humor would go over her head, and the message it's trying to tell would probably also go over her head. I really do look forward to showing this to her when she is older, but as at 5, in my humble opinion, I would say that's too young. Unfortunately, I don't think I can say anything else other than this film realist recommends this film if you're an adult. This would be a film that is worth seeing in theaters. If you are waiting to watch it on streaming, I respect that choice, but I think this is worth the theatrical experience. My theater was jam-packed, and it was a fun film to see with a group of strangers, which is what typically, unless you're buying out a theater, and then if you are doing that, you have my email. It's in the show notes. But Barbie is very entertaining, and I think it's going to be a wild success. Very curious to see what the box office numbers are going to look like at the end of the weekend. But this being the first part of my Barbenheimer experience, I was thoroughly entertained. I hope you enjoyed the non-spoiler section because I'm going to get into the specifics as to why I really enjoyed the film. Let's get into spoilers now. We are recording for your Barbie headband. All right, so Barbie spoilers are ahead. If you have not seen the film and you do not want it ruined for yourselves, well, duck out now because I'm going to but give away any surprises, spoilers, plot details that are going to help explain as to why I thoroughly enjoyed this theatrical going experience. All right, let's do this. So we obviously see within the marketing materials that Barbie Land and the real world are different places. One criticism I do have of the film is that we don't actually get any real explanation as to how Barbie Land exists. Apparently, the inventor of Barbie has supernatural powers, but we'll get into that at the very end of the film, which does end with a very good joke. But we see what the life is like for stereotypical Barbie. Margot Robbie is playing the very first Barbie, and one of the things that Mattel has done with Barbie more recently is diversify the Barbie toy doll pool, increasing representation. Let's face it, we live in a multicultural world, so you want to, from a business perspective, it also does work to have dolls that represent a wide variety of boys, girls, and non-binary children. And so we get to see what a life in the stereotypical Barbie sense is. Lots of parties, lots of ridiculous antics that would be the live-action physical representation of what it is like when a child plays with a Barbie doll. One of the things I know people were curious about was that 2001 sequence that was in the trailer is in the film and is in fact the beginning of the film. Helen Mirren is the narrator for the film. Or did I mess that up? No, I'm right. It's Helen Mirren. And so she provides some context to this. The meta level of humor is hilarious in this film. If you're unaware of what I mean, where it's breaking the fourth wall and referencing other types of franchises or speaking directly to the audience. The fourth wall being what separates you from the actual experience that is happening in the film in front of you, and the audience is behind that metaphorical wall, if you will. And we get to see slowly that something is going on with stereotypical Barbie, that her thoughts in her head are becoming more realistic to somebody who is clearly having some sort of crisis and talking about death. And this is, to quote something probably from an earlier time frame similar to how I'm dressed today, it harshes the mellow of Barbie Land. And she meets up with Kate McKinnon's Barbie, who is Weird Barbie, or Barbie that was played with too much and experimented with from a from a young boy or a young girl, where her hair's cut, she's been bent into the splits too often, and she's dressed in clothes that are not stereotypical to Barbie, and she's had marker drawn all over her. And she learns that the invisible walls between Barbie Land and the real world have been penetrated by someone's sadness, and that she needs to address whoever may be playing with her to help them get in a better mindset, be happy, and out of this sadness. And that will allow her to go back to being the Barbie that she was. One of the aspects early on in the film that I really did appreciate is that it's Barbie's world and Ken's, they're just lucky to be living in it. And that especially is true for Ryan Gosling's Ken, who his only thing that matters to him in his existence is getting Barbie to acknowledge him. And he is drawn to her. At least two of the Kens are. We don't get to see a lot of them have that perspective, but they may be more attracted, not in a physical or sexual way, but they're attracted to different Barbies throughout all of Barbie Land. And one of the aspects of the film that I really did appreciate is, I'm going to put this on the record, it may be wild assumption, but there are 3 actors from this film that are in sex education. So I'm just assuming that Greta Gerwig is a big fan of Sex Education, because we of course have Ncuti Gatwa, we also have Emma Mackey, and we have Connor Swindles, who is also from Sex Education, which is not shocking. Greta is clearly a big fan of the show, and why wouldn't she be? It's a great show, and they're all fantastic. And the fact that we have two of them playing a Ken and a Barbie, and that Connor's playing Aaron, just an intern, was quite funny. And they're all dramatically different. Although I guess Ncuti is close to Eric from Sex Education, maybe in apparel, but he actually gets probably the least to do amongst all the three of the sex ed alumni in this film. But anytime he's on screen, he's wildly entertaining, and I can't wait to see him as the 15th Doctor. I guess, yeah, he would be the 15th Doctor in Doctor Who this November. But back to Barbie. So she does travel to the world, and we get to see her experience a Generation Z's perspective on Barbie. And one of the aspects of the film that I did appreciate the most is that it does present ideas around what Barbie has meant to pop culture, the idealistic shape of a woman, where clearly the original Barbie, and consistently for a substantial period of time, Barbie's physical proportions are unrealistic, and setting up that image for young girls that that's what is the perfect body shape, and completely against body positivity prior to that sentiment even existing, is something that I'm glad the movie addressed. Clearly, Greta Gerwig had an idea in mind to what she wanted to do with this film and address all of the cultural impact that Barbie has had as a whole. And it acknowledges that and addresses that all in a really smart and compelling manner. And having those ideas and that ideology presented to stereotypical Barbie. My brain clearly is mixing Margot Robbie and Barbie, but Margot Robbie's Barbie being addressed with this sentiment really challenges what she thinks Barbies are supposed to be doing. Because in Barbie Land, every position of power is run by women. The Supreme Court, doctors, lawyers, the president. Obviously, there are more instances of women in positions of power more recently, but clearly the percentages of that are still dramatically more males than women. And that perspective gets put onto Ken, and he falls in love with the idea of the patriarchy and brings that over to Barbie world. So we get to see two different, or specifically in this, male and female characters or dolls learning about what gender norms and roles society has put on them since the creation of Barbie, and how that's changed and how that perspective has been altered over time. And that dichotomy is such an interesting perspective, because their wherewithal on how exactly things work is almost that to of a child, where they're presented with these very interesting and well thought out ideas and challenged their perspective, and are they going to grow and learn? And ideas about body positivity with women are presented, and stereotypical Barbie, Margot Robbie's Barbie learns about what it means to be a woman. America Ferrera actually has a phenomenal monologue where she talks about all of the expectations and inconsistency that is expected of women, specifically in North America, but I'd fair to say, again, this is based on my perspective, what other expectations are presented to women worldwide. And having a movie just blatantly point out the hypocrisy in those expectations and presenting that forward as to body positivity and different ideas and embracing what makes you you was awesome. And being the father of a young girl, I can't wait for these ideas of fair and reasonable expectations and saying everything, it's okay to be who you are for my little girl, is something I can't wait to have her experience as well. Again, when she's older, probably not a movie suitable for a 5-year-old, but it's up to the parental or guardian discretion. I mentioned the comedy. The movie, again, is very funny, and it plays with the idea, again, with them having this very simple sentiment that they'll say these ridiculous and outlandish things that could be mistrewn for inappropriate humor to some degree. And it's very comical in that sense where they're learning a lot of things. And Barbie going through this journey and having all the things she's learned specifically from America Ferrera and her daughter, and addressing that as when she returns to Barbie Land, all of the other Barbies have been brainwashed by the Kens, and they have fallen victim to the patriarchy, which Ryan Gosling's Ken is all about, that it had to do with horses. And the reason that he fell into this was he didn't think he was enough for Barbie because she wasn't even aware of the things that he was looking for, and he just wanted to be enough, or knuff, as it's said at the end of the movie. And one of the reasons he brings the patriarchy and embraces it so much is he was so hurt by Barbie's complete lack of interest in him. And I really appreciated how he's not played up to be a villain, but given a perspective that he knows very little about and thinks it is the right thing to do, and presented with an obstacle and ultimately learns that he is enough and he is who he is. He doesn't have to be somebody else for somebody else. And having different messages for different genders, I think, is a fair way to present it in the film. And it's not heavy-handed. I don't think it's presented in a condescending fashion, but I shouldn't even say but. There's no but. This film is wildly entertaining. It's very well thought out. It's very funny. And the way that it does integrate all of the Barbie branding throughout the film, showing different clothes and even pausing on it, using the narration of Helen Mirren to point out the insanity of somebody who looks like Margot Robbie saying she's not beautiful anymore, and stopping the movie to tell you, obviously we know this is ridiculous, look at Margot Robbie. It's funny through and through, and the audience that I experienced this film with was laughing at all the jokes, enjoying all the heartwarming and real sentiment that the film is trying to address. And I hope this is not the case, but given the fact that Mattel wants to make a bunch of other movies with their properties, I think they are, or I hope, not I think, because I don't know, I hope they are as thoroughly thought out as this was, because if that is the case, we are in for some special films that are based all about intellectual properties. But if that is not the case, thank God they made Barbie, because it was fun being in a Barbie world. Life in Plastic was fantastic. I think that's it. I'm going to quote of that song, but that will do it for the spoiler portion of the review. I hope you enjoyed the spoilers of Barbie, and I hope you saw it too, because it's wildly entertaining. I've said that a bunch, but it's one of the best ways to describe the film through and through. If you did see it and you want to let me know your opinion, you can tweet at me or at the podcast, and we can chat about it there on the socials. Other than that, that again will do it for the spoiler section of this review. All right, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. This will be not spoiling what movie I reviewed for the podcast. Again, if you are just listening to the intro and the outro, you won't know what movie I reviewed because it won't even be in the show notes. So you'll have to listen to the episode to know what I am reviewing. So this episode is coming out day of listed recording. Monday will be the second review of the Barbenheimer experience. And again, you won't know unless you listened to this episode and next week's episode, which episode was the review for that, or which review was for the film you were looking for. So if you did listen to the whole episode, thank you very much. Please share with a friend who also loves film. Rate on your podcast app if possible. You can email the show at any time at filmrealistspod@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you for part 2 of Barbenheimer.